Good morning. I decided for me to see the slides, I'm going to have to stand in front of somebody. So it looks like there's fewer people here, so I'll stand on this side. But some of you may want to move over so you can see. I was asked to talk about these two subjects, and Charlie just read over this slide sort of thing. But since I has been in almost every arena, I thought most of you don't know me, so I should tell you why I've been asked to talk about these subjects of land planning. But my wife and I have owned the Quarter Circle U Ranch, which is at the end of Peralta Road, and I'll show you in the next slide where that is. I consider myself a conservationist and a cattle rancher, and some people think that's a conflict of interest. There are right ways and wrong ways of doing any job, and if you do both of those the right way, in my opinion, then they complement and help the other. So I consider myself both of those. And the first 20 years that we owned the ranch, my focus was on improving the land. And we did lots of things to do that, and we improved it, and we monitored the rangeland every year to ensure that we're going in the right direction and so forth. But after 20 years, it seemed to slow down the improvement. And my NRCS advisor said, well, you know, it is a high desert, you can only do so much. But I thought the only way I could make it even better as land condition is that if I moved all of the cattle off during the harsh months of summer. So we bought the, what we call the Quarter Circle U North, which is up by Lakeside. And so for 6 months out of the year, we moved every head of cows from the Superstitions to the summer pasture up by Lakeside. Great for the land, great for the cows, a little hard on the ranchers. Cost a little bit of money. But by doing that, I could also double the number of cows I run. So it started out as a 200 head permit, and we now run 400 head of cattle. On state trust land, the rules are that you can have so many animal unit months, but you can run twice as many for half as long and still consume the same amount of feed. So that served that purpose. So for 17 years, both Judy and I lived at Lakeside in the summertime and down here in the wintertime, which isn't all that bad. I was not one of the founders of SALT, but when they founded it in '91, they asked me to be on their advisory board rather than the governing board. And in the next slide, you'll see why. And then about '95, they invited me to be on the governing board, and in '97, they asked me to be president of the board. My assessment at the time was that we are trying to preserve the salt. It's trying to preserve the foothills up against the wilderness area from development. Probably at the time I became president, we probably had $100,000 in the kitty from all kinds of fundraising activities. And even at that time, the land was going for $15,000 or $20,000 an acre. So we could maybe preserve 5 acres, but we wanted to preserve several thousand acres from development. So I said, well, we need to spend our money on influencing the decision makers rather than just buying land. And that's when I went to talk to Sandy. She was supervisor, one of the 3 county supervisors at the time. And she told me that Pinal County had to upgrade their general plan for the county in 2001. So I decided, well, we need to make a proposal to the county to keep all that space that we want preserved into open space, or have it designated in the general plan as open space. And so I initiated, you have to have some kind of a justification to go into supervisors of why it should be open space. So I decided we need to study why it should be open space, and initiated that study, and we finished it by 2001 so we could get it into the county. And we were successful in getting the county land plan, thanks to Sandy, who controlled a third of all the votes. And we got another one or two. So we finished that in '02. I had been involved in the East Valley Partnership, which is the business and community leaders of everything east of Phoenix at the time, and served as president in '02. But we had come up with the Superstition land plan at that time, and I looked south of US 60 from the area we're trying to protect. And there's no reason not to build anything between 60 and Sandton. I mean, it's not interesting land, it's not worth preserving for scenic beauty or anything, but it's highly developed, pretty flat, just a slow, sloping alluvial plain. So I said somebody should be looking at doing some responsible land planning for that huge mass area. And it turns out there's 275 square miles of state trust lands south of the wilderness area, north of the Santan private property, all the way to Florence, really, from Meridian Road. So, I'll get into that, but in what led then to Superstition Vistas, and I talked to enough people, including Sandy, about planning that for development as opposed to planning for conservation. So initiated that and got everybody organized, raised money, and we did a Superstition Vista study from about '02 through '10, and actually it's still, the remnants are still around. And I wanted to note that we started the salt land plan almost 20 years ago, okay, in '97. So I don't remember all the details. So it's a warning to you, or a reservation on my part. And even Superstition Vistas was started in '02, so that's almost 15 years ago. So, and I tried to get Mike Hutchison, who from the East Valley Partnership, that's the nominal director, Superstition Vistas, to be here today to answer current status questions, but he had another commitment, so he couldn't be here. Okay. When I was starting with salt, I had been previous, as the charter indicated, I was asked to start a new ASU campus at Williams Air Force Base. The closing of the Williams Air Force Base, and the Air Force, even before they announced that ASU was to get a significant amount of that, came to me and said, we have $600,000, I think it was, to do master planning for base reuse. Would you like to have it to do a master plan for the ASU campus? And of course I said, well, okay. And so we did a master plan, but we hired, advertised, selected a planning consultant, and they assigned this gentleman here, David Longy, to be the program manager for the master plan of ASU East. We completed that, And I got all the farmers together on the other side of Power Road and said, you know, we're going to have a big campus here. You guys should be planning on your land to do something with it, with the big population and the university campus and the community college campus. And I invited the city of, or town of Gilbert. Town of Gilbert thought that was a great idea, so they formed or decided to do land planning outside of our gate for a town center for Gilbert, and asked me to chair that study. So I then headed the committee to study economic or land planning for Gilbert outside on the east side of the west side of Bell Road. That company that Gilbert hired the same guy, Dave Longy, to head that project. So when I got a lot of background to say, when I got to trying to do a land plan of some sort to back up our request to the county supervisors for preservation, I went to Dave and said, you know, you're in land planning. Does anybody ever plan for open space instead of development? Most development plans are for, you know, cities, communities, and land to be developed in communities. And he said yes. And he said there are certain rules you follow, just like land planning for development, for open space planning. And he also told me that he had worked for the Forest Service in Northwest U.S. in doing just that for open space planning for the Forest Service there. And there are rules and so forth. And he'd be happy to organize a team to work with the SALT feasibility study, is the proper term, feasibility study for open space, which he did. He included design workshop, their GIS, Geographic Information Systems, which is worldwide and certainly in the U.S. database for all land characteristics, mostly characterized in each square meter. Okay, so it's a huge database, but the design workshop had just finished an open space study for Maricopa County a couple years before that. So he incorporated him and a consultant, so long life and range management consultant. Okay, so they're the team we hired to say, well, how do we preserve or do a feasibility study for preservation? But we decided we would do a feasibility study for conservation or preservation, but also a feasibility study for development. And then overlap the two and say, well, okay, what's more appropriate for development and what's more appropriate to be conserved as open space. We chose an area outlined here to be studied, which includes some private land. And on the other side of US 60, obviously if you're trying to preserve land here, this is a major highway going through it, and you're concerned about what are you going to affect the views along that highway and that development of the highway. So we went a mile south of the highway all the way and characterized all that land. First thing you have to do is get all the data that's applicable for either development or for conservation. Identify what is important, and then to quantify that as an inventory in this whole space. How do those things that are important? And so we went through a lot of things. The ownership of land. This is where, let's see. I was going to tell you where the ranch was to say why I was asked to be on the advisory board. This is part of the land plan, but we quantified everything, including the grazing leases. And this land here, sort of in the dark green, and these two sections over here, that is the Quarter Circle U Ranch. Okay, and so it's right in the mountain area of what we wanted to preserve. So that's why I was asked to be on their advisory board. And why I had so much interest. Here's some private land. That's where the ranch headquarters is located. They've always been there, starting 140 years ago. One of the oldest ranches and continuously operated in Arizona. But at the time when it was created, they built the ranch house in 1876. And at that time, all of this was just government land. And so it included all of this area that maybe you live in, all of what is now the Superstition wilderness area, the southern area. It went over to the river, the Patch Junction, up the river to what is now Canyon Lake, and then across and down. So it's a huge area. And if you can imagine running cows around Miner's Needle and Weaver's Needle and so forth, that pretty tough job. But anyway, that's what it was. When statehood came along, they had to divide up the land, of course, and the feds take what they want. And typically when areas become states, they take what they want as reserved federal lands and recognize the private ownership and then turn the rest over to the state. Well, most states, being run by politicians, they take care of their buddies and themselves and sell all that land off and then it's all gone. So that's why Oklahoma and all the other states that were added to the United States don't have open space and don't have much government land. A lot of them don't have federal land. The time they got to Arizona, they were a lot smarter because all of that land disappeared and didn't benefit the citizens of the state, only the politicians and special interests. So what they did in this case, they reserved this as federal lands, it's the Forest Service, and all this land and lots of the area of Arizona, they put it into a land trust for the people of Arizona. And very strict requirements on how to run and operate that trust so that they couldn't be preempted by politicians and special interests. So all of this land went into a trust, except there's a little section here, these little L-shaped looking thing, that had mining activity on it when it at statehood. So they kept that as part of federal BLM land. It went to the BLM land. And those of you involved in creating the regional park, that's what you're looking at. But that 500 acres or so has been part of this ranch for 140 years. And even since statehood is operated as an integral unit, state trust lands. And obviously our politicians have figured out a way of tapping into that trust for their interest, which you're going to vote on the next week or two. And they've figured a clever way of taking the money that's set aside for the public, meaning public schools, and taking money from that to pay their bills, which is their obligation to provide public education. So they figured out a way, like the other states have at statehood, how to get that to their benefit. Okay, well, enough of that. So the inventory. Ownership of the land is mostly state trust. All that blue is state trust, like most of Pinell County. Had a little bit of BLM land that we talked about. Private land in here, there's about 100 and some acres around the ranch headquarters. It's private. Development down here has been developed in the last several years. And then you look at where all the existing roads and trails, and this is important for connectivity to the wilderness area, which is a major part. And our ranch has 10 miles of border area with the wilderness area. So again, why we're important to that. Where the utilities, for development purposes primarily, these are the existing power lines there in red going across. Scenic fixtures, you can't read all this stuff, but things like Silly Mountain and Dinosaur and Rattlesnake Hill and all those things are scenic features in the area. Those are important for development. Geology is very important, especially in development, so that you can know what you can build and where. These lines here are fault lines, and they're only important for development if you're in the middle of a fault. So the area of interest here does not have any other than down this line here. Any concern about major earthquakes and restrictions on development. Streams and rivers are of interest for a whole variety of things. Floodplains are a major constraint on development, and so that all has to be defined. And it's also archaeological sites. Most of the Indians before us here lived along the streams or near springs, and we find all kinds of Indian signs near the springs we have on the ranch. Vegetation, this may seem like a strange one, but we wanted to take into account conservation and development point of view, wildlife. And how do you quantify wildlife in this area? Well, we decided probably the best thing you can do is to say, well, wildlife may be related, if nothing else, to vegetation and vegetation cover. And so it wasn't part of the GIS system for the United States or Arizona, but we found satellite data where they actually measured the biomass density from satellites, and they were able, consultants able to get that, and so they mapped the vegetation, but we'll use that later on in the drainages, as I like to say, flooded areas are 3 different A, B, and C. Designation A is like 100-year flood areas, and usually that's excluded from all kinds of county or local zoning codes. You're not allowed to build in A areas of floodplain. C is no danger whatsoever, and B is 300 or 400-year floods or something you don't usually take into account, but you can. So these wide streams identified here are the true flood zones of A. So that's very important for development, but also for wildlife, other things. And this is something Dave Longy brought to the Forest Service has a way of measuring scenic quality. It's an odd thing, very subjective thing, but it has 3 categories. Dark green is very scenic, and you can see it's mostly in the wilderness area. Middle green is sensitive, good scenic transition, and then the light color is no particular scenic value. Archaeology is hard to identify, but to put it on the map, we took several things. There are several designated archaeological sites in this area, and then we took a circle around each spring that's identified, because that's where the Indians tend to gravitate to and have remnants of. That's the wildlife I mentioned, so we tried to correlate the darkness of the green with where the wildlife would be from there. Recreation tourism is mostly hiking, and Superstition in that area of study, grazing I've talked about. This is the topography of the area, and several evident things from there, but this is where our ranch is, and it's an all horseback ranch because we have to run and move cattle in those canyons. So this is the mountainside, certainly not suitable for development, but it brings it out pretty vividly when you look at the topography of the area. Where this area over here is relatively flat, and slopes are a major consideration in development, as you probably know. Again, zoning for slopes beyond 15% or so, hard to get permission for. Soils are a major development thing, and there are various kinds of soils. Some are good for building, others you have expansive clays and so forth. They expand and contract and cause cracks in houses and all that sort of thing. So all those are important for development. And we're doing a feasibility for development as well as the feasibility for open space. View sheds, the capability they had, if you look, for instance, there's a red dot right there. All the yellow is what you see from 6 foot above the ground. If you're standing at that point where that red dot is, that's what you can see, all the yellow things. Limited value, but interesting technology. Okay, now you've done an inventory of all the things you think could influence our development or for consideration for open space. So now you have to analyze it, and this is where the subjective part comes in. You know, how important are different things? And so the land planners are used to this, especially for development. So there are guidelines that they've used in the past. And things that are important for development are slope, soils, floodplains, and some other considerations. But those are the things that limit development. So we decided to list for development everything that affects development and try to rank it from 0 to +10. And then use our inventory analysis to put that on various points. And for instance, here under slopes, everything from 0%, I know you can't read this, 0% to 5% is rated +10. That means it's highly desirable for development. Everything from 5% to 10% we rank with a 7, 10% to 15% with a 3, but anything greater than 15% with a -10. So we're rating, and so you apply that to your elevation maps. And soils, or certain kind of soils, are very good for development, and that's rated as an 8, and those that are okay are rated as a +5, and the bad soils for development are rated at -2. And again, our consultants are used to doing it. Floodplains are pretty, if it's an A, it's a -10, that's the 100-year flood. Those areas are sort of very bad for development, usually not allowed. And if it's a C, then it's a +5. Anyway, so you do that and compare all those numbers by those weighting factors on the whole area. And this is what you come up with. And the darker the brown, the better it is for development. And so this would be like +10. And the lighter shade, not as well for development. This is very poor for development over here in the mountains, for instance. And so those would be for development, a feasibility study for where you should build, where you shouldn't, or it's questionable. We then went through just for open space, the evaluation with all kinds of weighting factors on vegetation, floodplains, seismic, or sea quality, archaeology, wildlife, recreation, and so forth. And so we came up with this map in which the darker the green, the better it is for conservation or for preservation, and the lighter it is, that's not so important. So the plan was to, once we generate it for development and then for open space preservation, to overlap those two maps. The more negative the number is for preservation, the more positive the number. And so we then overlaid those two maps for development. Got this map where the green part is from all of those, each square meter in this whole area had a data point, and put all those weighting factors on it. The green is all the areas that ended up with a negative number, meaning better for conservation, and the light area here is all positive numbers, so much better for conservation. But you know, the world's not black and white. It's not either developable or preservation. So we went back and reran the numbers to say, well, let's divide it into three areas. The areas that are +5 to +10 should definitely be developed. Those that are -5 to -10 should definitely be preserved. And then you can argue about what's in between. And so if you do that, then you have three different colors. And so all of this less south of 60 should be developed. All of this area should be preserved. And then we can argue about these areas as maybe they're developable, but at very sensitive restrictions. Buildings per acre or building constraints or whatever. And we took that a step further, and to start what a developer would move into after the feasibility step, start, well, okay, what kind of plan do you do for development? So beyond probably our expertise, we looked at, well, how might one develop this land? And talked about these areas here for sensitive or unsensitive development, and the green being preserved. And that green is what we took to the county, anyway, with all of this background, this justification that should be preserved as open space. And we did it by a section or quarter section, which is the criteria we usually. Took it a step further and said, well, maybe we'd have village centers at these red dots and restrictions on development in here. Have a bypass of this whole area. Maybe you put a designation of a scenic highway on what is now 60. So that's what we went to the county with, and we were successful. Jason, if you switch to the other one. Took a long time to just talk about the salt plant. And a long time ago, we were successful in getting the county to change that to open space. Any questions on any of that?
How long did it take you to put that together?
It's about 3.5 years.
And was that...
The salt board acted as the steering committee for the consultants, and we met at least every month and more frequently on occasion. And they were giving us advice, and we were giving them advice, saying what we thought was important from the salt board.
But that also, did that include, well, you only have one section of BLM, right?
Yeah, it just had that,
So-
went in the section was 500 acres.
Was that even included, or is that kind of just around that?
The land study was for everything. Now, we can't dictate private land, but That was included, and that was in that green area someplace. So it was in the area of the county, and the general plan was put as open space, the BLM.
BLM will include that in his project though?
No,
Allow
BLM
that, or is
had
that?
nothing to do with the study. We're just analyzing the land plan, saying, well, we can't tell private owners that they have to go into a preserve of some sort. We're just saying, based on the quality and the characteristics of the land, it should be preserved.
I might have some information for Barbara. I think I know where you're going.
Oh.
That BLM piece that's now being planned for Peralta Regional Park, it was because of salt representation within the process as they were taking a 2-year process across the county to develop the open space and trails plan. Salt was there, and Salt was always saying, hey, I know a great place where there would be, it's BLM land, be a great regional park, 480 acres out in the middle of the state trust land. And it was because of Salt's bringing attention to that area and the county looking at the feasibility of it, that ended up on the map as one of the proposed regional plan parks.
Okay.
But what stimulated the discussion is that BLM opened up a new guideline to get rid of all these little pieces all over the countryside that they can't possibly manage. I never saw a BLM. I had a grazing lease on the BLM land, never saw a BLM person in these 39 years, 40 starting this summer. I just get a bill from them, and I pay them a bill, and that's all there is to it. But they started a new program to try to eliminate those by saying, if there are local municipalities or counties that would put this to a public use, like a park, then there's a mechanism that they establish that you can go through and acquire that. And it's because of that new BLM program that stimulated, hey, there's some BLM land. Silver Mountain went through that, didn't they? That was BLM land before. And so there was some precedent in our area. And so that's a likely, state land doesn't have any kind of a policy like that. You have to buy state land.
Right.
That's a real problem. Plus, they have to allow you to, they don't have to sell. So it's a target of opportunity. Yes?
Forgive me, Mr. Backus, during all your study, your feasibility study, what was your conclusion on availability of water? Because I don't know, I think maybe I was asleep, but I don't think I was. If you mentioned it, I missed it.
We did not consider water for development. We were mostly interested in preserving, you understand. I mean, that was our goal. But water's always a problem, and it's more of a problem when we got into Superstition Vistas. That whole area.
Right.
So I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to
Well,
Superstition.
because that's the key for everything, for any development.
Right. Yes.
I'd like to follow up on, because this is critical. When you brought in Prop 123, it makes it more critical to me.
Sorry.
Knowing how things are going to actually go in the future. And I've been a supporter of Superstition Vistas since it was a concept. But we have a water expert here, but my thoughts on it come largely from Grady Gammons Jr. that for any place to develop, you got to have land and sun and water, and of the three, the only one that's transportable is water. So if you're having development in one area, that's a competitor for development in another area. So how do you persuade one area that it should sacrifice its future for the benefit of another area? And I'd like to hear from our water expert what his thoughts would be on that.
Why don't we discuss that relative to Superstition Vistas, which is a development plan. For preservation, water isn't critical other than for wildlife that you want to preserve. So let me start in Superstition Vistas and instead of that discussion. So as I mentioned, we started this about 1901. I started discussing it and talked to Sandy about can we get all the communities and the east side of Phoenix involved and the counties involved in doing some very gross land planning for this huge area. And she said, I wouldn't put it on. That's sort of my translation of getting these people to talk. That was about the time Tino, mayor of Mesa then, and he started planning development on this side of, or planning to annex this side of Meridian Road into Mesa. So,
Just to let you know, at that point, I said, when you let me plan Maricopa County land, I'll let you plan my land. So we started off a little rough.
so it wasn't the most cooperative time. No, the worst time in the history of Arizona land is when they went into strip annexing. I don't know when that was, 70s, 60s, sometime. For cities, you can't, if you want to annex land, you can't cross over another zoning or you can't annex across another adjacent city's boundaries. So what they did is to annex a 1 foot wide strip or something like that all around a huge area. So nobody else could annex into that. And it was a terrible thing in East Valley. That's why Tempe is only this big, because they got outmaneuvered by all their surrounding neighbors. Gilbert, Chandler, Mesa, huge gobbling up of land. Williams Air Force Base, which I had a special relationship with, always had the address of Williams Air Force Base, Chandler, Arizona. Mesa went down Power Road around the base and back up. But this was strip annexing, so Chandler or Gilbert couldn't annex across that mountain. Anyway, that was the worst time. And we were in transition where they were going to violate certain things. So that's why Sandy didn't think that was going to be very possible. And when I first met with the mayor and the city manager, George Hoffman is retired, I guess, these days, but about planning for Superstition Vistas, George's question was, why in the hell do you think you can plan our land better than we can? Which was sort of the feeling. And why it was an uphill battle to talk to all of these people. The State Land Department was on the verge of suing the Maricopa County Flood Control District. As you know, after they put in the Arizona Canal, or not the Arizona Canal, the CAP, through this area, they wanted to protect the canal from runoff from superstitions, it's alluvial flooding. Anyway, so they built big retaining walls around the north side of that catchment basin so they wouldn't wash out the CAP. But it also a lot of that water would end up in Maricopa County in runoff. The irrigation districts drain down to their ditches, drain down to Queen Creek. But the Maricopa Flood Control District didn't ask the state permission, did not get a permit to do that. They built all those dams, and many years ago, they never paid the state any money for the use of state trust land, which is against their charter. So they were on the verge, and the state land department person at the time, happened to be a real estate specialist, he was preparing a lawsuit against the flood control district for all those past years, damage and non-rent paid and all that. And I talked to all of the above people and said, you know, that's why we need to have some kind of a land plan in that whole area. Why don't you just hold off and let's figure out that with a land plan, a development plan for that whole region, and then talk about flood control, retention basins and so forth, like you do in any other development in the valley. As part of it's integrated into not causing a flood down to the dam as it goes on. And they backed off, but there was a temporary truce, which is still holding today. But I don't think the flood control district has paid the state anything. But I'm not sure of that now. Anyway, let's get on. Superstition Vistas then evolved within a month or a year or two, and sort of got all these people together, including CAP people, in a room in the State Land Department. And we started talking about, well, maybe it's everybody's advantage to do sort of general land planning for this area that's so big. And the first step we did was an intermediate step saying, well, why don't we bring some experts in to do a superficial study of whether it's justified to get into a more general study. So each of these entities, maybe 15 of them, maybe 12, said, we asked each one to contribute $20,000, and then we hired the Morrison Institute, which is public policy institute at ASU, to do superficial evaluation. Interview people in this whole area to say, what would you like to see in that area? Does it make sense to study this? Where is the water going to come from? First question on our agenda. If there's no water available, we can't, no use do planning on this land. And so, Grady Hammond was just coming on the Morrison Institute part-time, is that, so they put him in charge of that. And no, Grady or not, he's a pretty outspoken, opinionated guy. And his basic opinion is that water doesn't flow downhill, water flows towards money. If you have money, you can get water anywhere you want. And I sort of object to that, but it's sort of true, so I can't object to it. I mean, it just doesn't seem like the rich people should get all the water kind of thing. But then he did go through analysis of various water aquifers around and what's available. And like upstream in the CAP, there's some huge state water underground reservoirs on state trust or under state trust land on the west side, outside of Phoenix, to the west on your 60-foot CAP, so you can transport it down here to this area, and it's state trust lands and it's huge reservoirs, and he had the numbers on. Anyway, SRP, which was one of the first people I went to and I knew the general manager, and so I went in and said, you know, this is a huge potential benefit for SRP. This is 275 square miles in your service area that could be 1 million or more people or customers. And I asked him for $500,000, but he said, no, I don't think that's in our service territory. This is the general manager of SRP. I said, check with your people, it's in your service area. And they're the ones that discovered this conflict of a potential lawsuit. And they said, you know, we can't get in the middle of that lawsuit, so we can't participate. It was pending in between the state land department. Anyway, we overcame, quieted all those kinds of concerns and said, let's go on with it. And so over the years, we raised probably over $3 million from a lot of different people. And to then afford after that preliminary thing of Morrison Institute. Cost $100,000 or something like that. But over the years, these are the major supporters of SRP came around, Resolution Copper, Sonoran Institute, and the Lincoln Institute, you may not know much about. Lincoln is a huge institute, if any of you have used Lincoln Welders out of Columbus, Ohio. They're home base. Anyway, they have a huge trust that is devoted to land policy. They support the Sonoran Institute. All of these diamond sponsors, they've each contributed over $500,000 out of their resources to the Superstition Vistas. And other donors are the hospitals, which of all people, they have to plan where population goes and prepare and buy land and provide health services and those things. So they were very, very interested, so they participated. Each of these municipalities or counties all contributed money, not large sums, but and had representatives on the steering committees. And so we got commitments for large chunks of money, like a couple $1 million. And so then we advertised nationally for consultants for that kind of study. And we really had a lot of interest from national and international land planners, because no one's ever thought of developing 275 square miles or planning for it. So we got a lot of attention, and which made our decision more complicated. But we chose this consulting team put together by Robert Grove. He's out of Utah, and he's the one that led. He's a businessman in the factory there, but he did Envision Utah. I don't know if you've ever heard of that study of how to develop Utah, and that's why Salt Lake has high-speed rail, or not high-speed rail, but light rail all over the valley and so forth. All came out of that study. So he headed that as a citizen, but he hired these experts. Friganosi is out of Seattle, expert in all kinds of housing developments and community developments and so forth. And EDAL, which I don't even know if they exist now or not, but it used to be an environmental specialist company for planning. And they had all kinds of consultants, and Harris Interactive, they're specialists in social systems and attitudes and values. So they were hired to go around and talk to a lot of people in the area. What are your values for land development? What are the important things? And that's where we got a lot of our guidelines from their studies, the collection of information. What's going on nationally with development and attitudes changing and so forth. For example, my generation, the ideal retirement plan was to have a huge, expansive house on a golf course. That's the ultimate you could plan for. Today, nobody wants to live on a golf course. Very few people do. They don't want big houses they have to maintain and work at. They want homes that they can walk to do their shopping, or convenient shopping anyway. They like to work within convenient places. They don't want to drive everywhere. They like to take public transportation if it's affordable and convenient. The attitudes are changed, and so for the kind of planning we're talking about, 50 years, you have to plan for what people want then rather than what they used to want, which is easy to document. Okay, so There are lots of expertise that is involved here. This is a transportation planning company. This is a real estate planning company, all national companies. And so they brought this kind of team to bear. And with that amount of money, we could attract that kind of expertise as well. We had a steering committee representing all of the municipalities primarily, as well as the industrial, or SRP is not industrial, but it's a municipality actually, legally, Resolution Copper and hotels and so forth, but representatives from all of the surrounding communities. Canal Partnership, in this whole process, working with the East Valley Partnership, and I was the president of the East Valley Partnership in 02 to 04, so I promoted Superstition Vistas as my signature contribution. And we helped Sandy and others create the Canal Partnership at that time, and then the Canal Partnership and the East Valley Partnership sort of co-oversaw that the Canal or the Superstition Vistas. Let's see, Jason is actually on the list. He attended the meeting along with Sandy. Okay, well, I have to go through these pretty fast, but Superstition Vistas was a planning for essentially all the state trust lanes, 275 square miles. All had one owner, so they simplified it from a planning point of view. And the population, by almost all the projection, was about 1 million people within 10 years, 50 years. But that area, if you superimpose it on the same scale, is bigger than Tempe, Mesa, Gilbert, and Chandler all combined. So it's a huge area from a planning point of view. So we had to do, like these values that I was talking about, we had to generate databases like GIS, like we did for salt land studies. And you had to do economic assessment. And then after you have all of this inventory, then you do scenario development. You say, well, let's design this area with these kind of constraints. And that's one scenario. Let's change the constraint, design another under that, and then go through and analyze those various scenarios. Steering committee, you saw the key people in that. With the executive committee, we set up technical committees outside of the steering committee to do special things like economic development. Sustainability is a major consideration for this. And it's not environmental sustainability. A lot of people think sustainability is environmental sustainability. But that's just one of the factors if you're talking about communities and people that have to have jobs and live in that community and so forth. So you have a lot of other considerations besides just the environment, like the last one, preservation of open space. That's where we started with salt. But there's a lot more things that have to be considered. And so you look at that land and start coming up with scenarios of how to develop that land. And all kinds of things come into it. Obviously, the environment is of special concern to salt, but transportation is a major community planning tool and should be. And then you worry about the energy use, jobs, land consumption, water use, open space, all that stuff has to be considered in designing a sustainable community. So we had all of that looked at, but very, very complex subject. And then you can make projections, but most of them are like 1 million people in that area, so it's just going to be large. At the same time, there's some national studies talking about population growth in the United States, and they came up with designations of mega regions, like the Northeast corridor here, Northern California and the valleys, Southern California. One is the Sun Corridor, which goes north, Phoenix up to about Prescott, so a little bit of Yavapai County, and down through Tucson. And of course, we are in the valley between Tucson and Phoenix. The alternative, and I-10 goes through the Indian Reservation, not a very good piece of land to try to do community planning for. And give you a right of way to the road, but we really, the population is going to be Phoenix, out 60 area, and then down to Tucson, to Florence and down to Tucson. So that's the Sun Corridor, and there's another frontal range, meaning Denver, Colorado Springs, down to Albuquerque. Those are mega regions. If you look at this area for Pinal County, obviously all of that yellow is state trust land, so that's a major consideration. I'm telling folks that all those lands don't produce any tax revenue. So you've got that's a separate problem you need to address. So we developed 4 different scenarios with different transportation schemes, various, and just to review those quickly. This was scenario A. If you, and all of these that I'm just going to skip through, this is the lowest area preserved space in all the 4 scenarios we developed. And of all this area, 40% of that would be open space. One of the interests of the millennials now, that we call them or something, they want to have a non-demanding home to take care of, but the ability to get the open space so they can hike and have outdoor activities, go to shopping without driving to Phoenix and all these kinds of things. So besides this area up here, and if you look at all these scenarios, this area up here is always open space. Probably has something to do with the chairman. But this is all open space in all the scenarios we developed. And, but this one has a lot more than this area that's open space, because all these corridors, if you look at all those corridors for streams to run in, those are ideal corridors for hiking and outdoor activities, for parks, for wildlife corridors to get from one place to another. So a lot of, we talked about developing high-density places for the convenience of people who live there, to eat and work and play in one small location, with high-speed rail connections and freeway connections to the metropolitan areas or other places. So the next scenario B had even more preserved space, and so higher densities, more open space. C had the majority of open space, and even higher concentrations in more limited areas. And scenario D was Sonoran Institute's paper when they wanted everybody to live in a high-rise area and walk out the door into open space. So this was the highest density where you're preserving 73% of the entire space. So after we developed those scenarios, and the darker the color, the higher the density of people, that's what that means. So very high densities. But you have regional centers as one of the premises, and then you have neighborhood village centers around that. But then high centers here, high density centers, so you don't have to go to Phoenix for anything that you want, or everything that you want. Okay. So we did a comparison, you do an analysis of the consultants do analysis of all those four. There are all kinds of lessons learned from that, and you compare like what are the densities of various cities in the United States, and where do these scenarios fit in that, and are there certain ones that we want to fit into or not. So a lot of comparison to other places. Housing, the premise, or what we assume, or the studies, the interview with people and the values established, said we want to have communities where there's available housing for all income levels. Don't have this as the ghetto, and this is the Scottsdale, or whatever you want to call it. Let's have desirable, but a variety of housing available in all the communities that are developed. So you look at apartment living, you look at townhouses, and in the future, energy and water are two driving things that are limit development. And so you want to have a lot of common borders, say, between living units, maybe what we used to call duplexes, but in a nice way, so you have a common wall that you don't have any energy losses across, or several common walls. Our daughter lives in a place in Tempe called the Cottonwoods, and you have to look closely to see that all these houses are connected on both sides. But they're also individually designed. And this is a 25-year-old development or so. Anyway, those are the things that we can do to save the energy requirements in the home. And the water requirements, most of the water in Phoenix goes for outdoor watering of yards and plants. That's a dumb use of water in a desert. So why don't we have houses that collect water, rainwater off the roof and other areas, and use that water to water our plants, and use gray water for that, and all these other things, and lower the need for municipality water in the new developments. So there's lots of things that the development of the future is going to be doing differently than what we've had. Economic development, and we had economic development experts, and they looked at all kinds of places, kinds of economic development in the near term, intermediate, long term. You want to attract high quality jobs, so you have to have communities where those employees want to live, and you have to attract them to that area to provide jobs, so you don't have to drive 50 miles and become another LA. And there's all kinds of, we had an economic development committee, subcommittee that was not made up of only and said, you know, what are the kinds of things we could develop, the kinds of job creation areas we could develop. Worry about heat islands and how do you mitigate that. These are all for desert planning communities that, you know, we built Phoenix just like everybody else built communities. Didn't consider it in the middle of the desert. Transit is a major consideration, which can vary from all kinds of things, but for the most part, we have a rail connection that connects Phoenix with Tucson, and that rail connection could be commuter rail, it could be light rail, could be a whole lot of things, but it would be nice to have communities in here that are connected so you don't have to get on the freeway. Freeway is a fact of life. This might be a freeway connecting to the airport, 24, coming across here, coming in. There could be other, those in Pat's Junction area, Gold Canyon, we've always talked about a north-south major freeway of some sort. And we're trying to argue about the siting of that now. And Superstition Vistas trying to put extra pressure on state land, or state highway department. Let's get those corridors established now before you start building houses. Put corridors for utilities in now, and then build houses and communities around. Don't build the communities and then say, oh, we need the freeways over here, so let's buy all the houses out, make it expensive and disrupt the community. Now's the time to do it, and that was my incentive anyway, trying to get Superstition. Get those things decided up front and then build communities around. Also, you can compare with various U.S. average and so forth for all these things. If you design communities, you can design them so that they're within a quarter mile of rapid transit or bus lines or whatever. Cut down miles and emissions, all kinds of buildings use, energy conservation in buildings, all kinds of things that we can do now that weren't done before. Plan your power transmission corridors and then work around those. Water use. Probably have to import water, but one of the things that Superstition Vistas stimulated was for SRP to study this area. They never studied. And after 4 or 5 years of study, they found there's a lot of water under us. Nobody knew about it. I don't think the aquifers are as big as on the west side of Phoenix, but there is a lot of water, more than they ever thought was available, besides the transportation into the area. Conserve water in the buildings, collect the water and use it for non-human consumption. All kinds of ways of doing that. All of that has to be done for communities in the desert. It just hasn't been properly considered before. So we did come up after we studied 4 scenarios with a scenario S, which is sort of the recommended what we've learned from the other scenario, and that's what we finished up after what we learned going through the study. It's called scenario S, the preferred alternative. All kinds of considerations with that scenario. We finished up the study. I'll just buzz through all these. Lots of things, and I guess the impression I would like you to go away with is this was a significant expenditure of time by experts across the country in what could be done in our environment. And so it's a great opportunity to get input of things that they could advise or not advise. Even when we did the soul study, I went down to State Land Department and their planning department and said, okay, we want to do a suitability analysis for development. You guys do that all the time. What are your guidelines and your weighting factors when you do that kind of feasibility for development? They said, we don't do that. Somebody wants to buy some state property, we'll hire a consultant to do a feasibility study to see if it makes sense to do it, and then we'll put it up for auction, for public auction. Anybody can buy it. That's sort of the guidelines they had. And they participated. They were on our steering committee actually for a long time. The director, is that what he's called? Director of the State Land Department and the associate director were both came to all of our committee meetings. So, I mean, we're planning their land, and so they should be involved. Um, But when I go down and talk to the people in the trenches, their attitude, well, you can plan anything you want to in state trust land, but that's our land, and we'll do with it what we want to when the time comes. That's their attitude. And indeed, Superstition Vistas has no political status, no clout, to do anything other than do a study that people can look at and learn from, and maybe some guidelines. So our goal, we could not go to the county to say, we would suggest you include this in your county general plan. We are not property owners. I mean, Superstition Vistas was not. So we had the state land department involved. So our customer, if you will, we submitted our final report to the state land department. They're the ones that went into the county board and said, here's what we recommend based on Superstition Vistas. Here's what we recommend for the new general plan for Pinellas County. And I was very disappointed in that, not surprised, but very disappointed. It has houses, low-density houses, right up to the National Forest, right up to the wilderness area. But that's sort of their charter. And so you have a tough time arguing with it. What we need to do is to change the state trust lands, not in 1, 2, 3 way, but to give them more flexibility. You know, if the state highway department wants to build a road through state trust land, they have to buy that right of way from the state land department. You can't designate as a gift. Doesn't matter if that enhances all the land around that road, that they can sell off for a big profit, more profit, if they have a state highway market. They can't give the state highway department anything other than the commercial price of that land at the time. And they have to bid like everybody else. I mean, there should be more public interest restrictions and opportunities built into the state trust lands than what they have. All they did was to try to protect the state trust land from misuse by saying it's all public, you can't do anything on state land. You can't go out and walk on state lands without a permit and paying for it. I can't ranch. I pay for my grazing lease from state trust land, quarter circle view. I pay about $6,000 a year for a grazing lease. That all goes to K through 12. If you sell the land, that goes into this permanent trust. And that's, the state was restricted to only acquire and allocate with the same restrictions as mine money goes for leasing a certain land, from the profits from that trust. And so it's been relatively low, 2.5%. So, but that's all the politicians could use, and we tried to pass laws some time ago that they couldn't just set up a state education budget and then say, well, we're going to get $10 million from the trust, so let's take $10 million out of what we got to help what we set aside for. We all, is that those 301, I think, initiative that was on the ballot, and most of us voted for, which said you can't do that anymore. That has to go to education without you use the tracking. Okay. I've talked way too long. So anyway, those are the background for all of your activities in Pinellas County to provide for open space for the citizen, or think about development for the people in Pinellas County. Now, I don't know if you want to talk any more about water or not.
Well, I think we made a connection. I was going to pursue a couple of afterwards.
Okay. Any other quick questions? Well, thank you. Sorry I run over my time. You did. He didn't give me up to an hour and a half, so I'm within that, but that's all. Okay? Well, thank you.